Hello, everyone. Welcome to this episode of SBJ Live. I'm Dan Kaufman. This is Fan-Centric Data, how leagues and teams create data-driven fan experiences, presented by Stellar Algo. Thank you all very much for being here. In just a moment, we will get to our panelists. But before we do that, as you are joining us here, if you've been to an SBJ Live episode, you know that I go over just a couple of ground rules that I hope everyone will help us go by. And what they will do is they will allow us to have the most effective experience for both the panelists and most importantly for the audience. So these are the ground rules for every episode of SBJ Live for the audience members. And really they relate to one ground rule, and that's just we want your interaction. We want your engagement. This is going to be a great conversation among the four of us up here, but the great thing about this platform is that it allows for you all to interact with us as well. And so what does that mean? One, it means that there's a chat bubble in the bottom right-hand corner of your screen. Please go ahead and introduce yourself in that chat bubble and tell us who you are and what you do. And if you see people you know, feel free to message them directly in that chat as well. We really encourage that. And then directly to the left of the chat bubble is a questions bubble. That's where we want your questions. There's no specific Q&A period at the end. Please submit your questions whenever they come into your head. And you can upvote questions that you see in there. We will do our best to get to as many questions as possible, but we certainly will get to the questions with the most votes before we get to the other ones. That's really it. Enjoy, interact with us. We'll go for about 45 minutes, but if we have a ton of questions from the audience, we will keep going for the full hour. All right, fan-centric data, how leagues and teams create data-driven experiences. We have Vincent Urquindia from Stellar Algo. He's the founder and chief executive officer. Curran Racklin, senior vice president, fan engagement, analytics, and research from the National Hockey League. Zach Shapiro, Vice President, Data Strategy and Analytics from the National Basketball Association. Gentlemen, thank you so much for being here. I'm going to give each of you 30 seconds to a minute to just introduce yourselves, and I will start with Zach.
Thanks, Dan. Great to see you. Grateful for the opportunity to talk with Vince and Curran today. Hi, everyone. Zach Shapiro. I work for the National Basketball Association. I've been here for a little bit more than 10 years now. I work in our data strategy and analytics function, a centralized resource to help stakeholders here at the league, and also work very closely with teams on a lot of what they are doing in their particular parts of the NBA. I have a lot of experience working closely with teams on a litany of initiatives, and obviously, per the tenor of today's conversation, very focused on fan data and leveraging that information to drive a strong fan experience.
Thank you, Zach. Curran.
Thanks again for the opportunity. Hello, everyone. My name is Curran. I've been with the NBA for almost 6 years. It'll be 6 years in a couple of weeks. Our group works across kind of how I think about the life cycle of our fan data and digital experience. So exposing more fans, more people out there to our game, the collection of data across a wide spectrum of sources, the engineering, warehousing of all that, the analytics, and then the kind of digital marketing and outbound fan engagement side, as well as working across all 32 of our clubs with kind of cohesive data sharing and making sure that they're the best equipped to succeed as possible. So happy to talk about this today.
Thank you, Curran. Last but not least, Vince.
Yeah, hey Dan. Thanks for having me on with this great group here today. I've got CEO and co-founder at Stellar Algo, almost 20 years of experience in data and technology driven roles now. Most of that has been within the sports entertainment. I've been in roles in North America and Europe, leading right up until founding Stellar Algo in 2016.
Thank you, Vince. To the audience, as you're joining us, make sure you introduce yourselves in the chat and say hello, and then give us your questions. There's a questions tab. Put the questions in at any time, and we will do our best to get to them. Vince, I'm going to stick with you. I want you to kind of set the scene for us. Look, the audience members, I know most of you guys out there know about the importance of using data to improve fan experiences in sports. We're going to talk about a particularly interesting segment of that, in my opinion, and that's how teams and leagues can coordinate around fan data to drive even better fan experiences. Vince, what does that mean to you? Tell us what we're going to talk about.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's an exciting time for this conversation. We can read the headlines about how the sports industry continues to expand and grow. It's a $200 billion ecosystem now. Team valuations growing. Rights fees on broadcast or advertisers continuing to grow. and that's really underpinned by the fact that we've got the most passionate customers in the world. They're 10 times or more passionate about the teams and players that they cheer for than any other audience. So it's a really exciting time to be in our industry. However, with these growing rights fees and valuations and changing consumer preferences, it is forcing us as an industry to think about how to continue to innovate in order to meet the needs of these changing fans, understand who they are, and I think what this conversation gets me excited with regards to is a lot of that future value we're looking for does come down to collaborating around that fan, because we've got leagues that have an important role to play in understanding and nurturing that fan. The teams that they work closely with, and then the partners, and some of those I've seen even in the chat here today. We've got your broadcasters and your major advertisers and other players that are partners in this ecosystem. That's all built around the fan. So we've got two incredible experts here in Curran and Zach who have been innovating in this space. They've seen the NBA and NHL even over the course of the last few years. Coming out of the pandemic, like rapidly changing, and how they try to meet the needs of their stakeholders for the benefit of fans. So that's really the backdrop and what I'm excited about.
Yeah, Vince, I'm going to stick with you, and then I want Curran and Zach to chime in. The question is this: what challenges did you see when you first started thinking through this concept of making sure that there was better collaboration on data between teams and leagues, and how did you go about trying to solve them? And then Zach, Curran, please chime in.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, so for Stellar, and our role in this is really bringing that technology that makes that collaboration between the leagues and their teams easier. The challenge is there's a lot of different systems that fans are interacting with, and then there's multiple stakeholders we're talking about, but we're trying to drive seamless and relevant experiences for the fan, and that can be really hard. But we work with over 7 leagues directly, over 240 sports properties and their partners. So that sort of puts us in a unique position to create the tools that make it easy to, what we like to say is, put the fan opportunities at your fingertips, because there is all this data. But really the magic is in how do we make these fan opportunities easy to access and action, so we can create the value for the ecosystem.
I think Vince said. I think Vince said something really interesting. A lot of very interesting things there. But the litany of touch points that fans have, and you just take a look at it from the fan perspective. I'm a fan of many sports teams, and how I interact with those sports teams is going to differ by the league and the team I'm a fan of. And then you look at that from a data perspective. We just have to take a step back and acknowledge data collection and data usage is really difficult. We at the league have been investing time and resources and energy to create our own fan data platform through the avenues of touch points that we have with our fans, so that we can create a personalized experience. Teams have been doing that since longer than I've been at the NBA. All 30 teams have robust data infrastructures and marketing infrastructures that they leverage on their own terms to communicate with fans. And I think the challenge for us is, how do we ensure that the fan is getting a unified and personalized experience no matter who is communicating with them and who holds that relationship? Ideally, we are arming the right stakeholder on our side with the correct information to create that optimal experience for fans.
Yeah, I mean, it's always fun speaking last because everybody else said all the smart things first. But
you get to go first next time.
All right, well that's also hard. But I think taking that cohesive kind of experience that both Zach and Vince alluded to is really important, because fans, customers, they don't differentiate between each experience, the league, the teams. They're seeing it as one general piece, and to take a variety, a disparate amount of data, and we're pulling from hundreds of sources at the league level, plus what the clubs are all doing, and creating a kind of a unified experience so that fans feel that it's seamless. If they do something that is a league-based initiative, voting for in the All-Star game, for example, or a club-based something like Maybe you went to a season ticket holder event. Those are two totally different platforms that are going to be different types of data, different people involved, different organizations. So that the trick is, I think, and the challenge we've had, and I think we're constantly going to be solving for, because it's never going to end, is to pull all that together so that no one knows that these are all different experiences, right? The goal is so that it's completely seamless. And there's business processes pieces to that. There's also technical processes and pieces to that we have to manage. And, Vince mentioned 240 sports properties. That's 240 different data schemas. That's 240 different sources of data. And like pulling all that together in one place is a little bit of a trick. But I think that's what we're trying to achieve. So that, you work very hard, you work a lot so that it looks like it was easy. And that's kind of I think that's what we're trying to do when it comes to providing that unified experience for our fans.
Yeah. Kern, I'm going to stick with you. Was there hesitancy, concern from the perspective of the teams when, the leagues kind of, I don't know if the leagues were the ones that approached or not, but if the leagues came to the teams and said, look, hey, we're going to start doing this, was there hesitancy, even just from the perspective of like, well, wait a minute, I already know my data the best. Like, why do I need to do this?
Yeah, I don't know if hesitancy is the right word, but I think, everyone wants to understand what we're doing. And I think that, when I was on the club side, I felt like I knew my fans better than the league did. When Zach's team or when my team came to our office to talk to us, I was like, what are we doing? We know this stuff better. And probably right. And right now, if a club said we know our fans better, they're probably right? They're a fan. They're working with them more. But it is about kind of that incremental understanding and knowledge and providing that cohesive experience that we were just talking about. And so showing that there is a benefit to pulling this together, and that it's not, we're not competing with each other, right? It's not, we're not trying to do what they're trying to do. I have very few tickets to sell. So trying to work with our clubs so that they saw the benefit of that. And then also understanding that every club has a different set of needs and benefits and resources internally. And so while I think every club can benefit and help, therefore, every fan, how they're benefited in the process is going to look a little different, both because the organizations are different, but also because the fans are different, especially across, 32 clubs. So, but once we were able to have that kind of understanding of what we're trying to do, and this is really about a better fan experience and literally nothing else, that I think is a driver, and that's why we're able to, have this initiative move forward.
Dan, I certainly remember the day well when we visited Kern, and he told us that he knew his fans better than we did, and we took that to heart very well. I mean, if I can add to it, I think there's been just a general groundswell on better understanding fans, more personalization, and how we get there is more important than who's sort of the owner of the information. From a league perspective, we've always tried to distill this down in terms of discussing with teams where we think the benefit of collaborating more closely in this space is to a few things. One, as I mentioned earlier, teams have already incredibly robust data infrastructure of fans. There's likelihood, and we've seen this bear fruit already in the early stages of the initiative that we have on the NBA side, is that there's likely records of fans, either geographically who have explicitly said they're fans of certain teams, that a team may not have in their database. We want to make sure teams actually have access to those people, so that, again, spinning it to the fan side, if I'm a fan of the Memphis Grizzlies, I want to make sure I'm feeling like I'm communicating with the Grizzlies and I'm getting that customized experience. Additionally, if I already have fans in my database as a team, I want more information. I want to have a better understanding of the global touch points that this fan is. This fan engaging with the NBA app, other direct-to-consumer products? Are they purchasing retail? All these touch points that can help me better understand what this fan particularly cares about. And then I think, obviously, maybe I'm teeing this up for Vince a little bit. We're talking a lot about the data. It's also about how we get that data and make it actionable. And I think that's where working closely with Vince and his team at Stellar Algo has really moved this initiative forward for us, making sure we have a technology that can take that data, really actively segment people and provide that personalization and make it feel like it's truly a fan-forward discussion.
Vince, Zach teed it up for you. Do you want to talk a little bit more about taking that data and making it actionable?
Yeah, I think so. And that's, I think that when you ask about the challenges, and Kern and Zach are alluding it to this, is, it's also that whether league to league and team to team, there's different, sophistication levels around, the technology, the the robustness of the data asset, the maturity of that data asset, the processes within the organization, and having the right people in the right seats to really take action. So, with our experience, what we are all about is really the technology, and then what we call the plays off of that technology to go and realize the value of these fan opportunities, because we're doing a lot at our teams. We're doing a lot at the leagues. So the key word here is making it easy. And when we do that, it makes the teams happy. The league is bringing new opportunities to us. We know more about our fans and our local market and internationally than we ever have before. And then vice versa, the leagues are providing value, and they're able to then nurture fans as well through their own channels, and that's shifted in a lot of cases as well, because ticket sales continue to be the bedrock of the industry, but that is rapidly evolving, and the leagues have an increasing role and influence to play in monetizing fans more 365 days a year.
Very, very interesting comments, Vince. We got a great question from the audience, and maybe we get back to some of your comments in a minute, Vince, but I'm going to get to this question now. To the audience members, keep the questions coming. We will do our best to get to all of them. This is from Dan McBride. Thank you for the question, Dan. How do you see AI developing and impacting, enhancing the aggregation, consolidation, and analysis of fan data to make a more efficient, personalized, and memorable experience for each fan? Who wants to tackle that one first? Do we have any hand raisers?
Yeah, I'll take a shot at it first. And nice to hear from you, Dan. It's been a while. I think it'll be a little slower into the full adoption, generally because I think because there's a lot of unknowns and people don't exactly know, how it's going to work or what the risks are when you have something that you don't have total control over that has access to the internet. What does that look like? And there's some concerns. So it'll probably take a little time to fully adopt. But if you're able to do things that we're currently doing and just do them a lot faster, and then when it's processing data or looking for outliers or looking for trends, both on a data kind of processing and analytical standpoint, but also from a quality control and accuracy standpoint, I think that there'll be increased adoption and that things will start to move a lot faster. I don't think that's a concern in terms of the people doing the work now. I think part of that knowledge base will have to shift a little bit in terms of where your focus is, but I think that it can be a valuable tool once we get a good handle of how it can be applied. Because what you don't want is, first of all, people use the term AI without really understanding what that means, and it becomes very broad. We've been saying it for a long time. We now feel it's better, but I don't think that that's always the case. I think a better understanding of how it works and what it can do will lead to greater adoption. So I think it'll be a little slower than maybe we'd like to see just in general, but I think that's the smart way to approach it, at least from our perspective.
We've got some other good questions coming in from the audience. Austin Fletcher has a question here. He's got 3 upvotes. When you think of fan data, what data do you believe is the most impactful to driving personalized fan experience and revenue? And what data do you find is the most difficult to capture? So that's almost 2 questions from Austin here. What data is the most impactful in driving that fan experience, if you can put your finger on that? And then what data do you find is the most difficult to capture? Zach, can we flip this one to you since Curran was volunteer for the other one?
Yeah, absolutely. Austin, that's a great question. And I do agree with you, Dan. It's a little bit like 2 questions in one. I think from a revenue perspective, what we see is historical actions from an individual fan in terms of what they've purchased is the predominant driver in what they're going to do in the future. And we obviously pay close attention. We have a number of models running, and we work closely with teams, and they have their own individual models to help them better understand who is more likely to potentially purchase more and more frequently. When you think about selling, as Vince said, a single game ticket versus plans, that past purchase history is still going to be the most powerful information you can leverage. I think the more interesting piece of it is the improved fan experience, and I think this is where our redevelopment of the NBA app and launch of the NBA app before this past season, and the inclusion of NBA ID as a benefits and rewards system, and being able to collect more data on our fans on their own terms, is where we are starting to see better data capture and the ability to personalize that experience a little bit better. We have an understanding on people's interaction with the NBA app, when they are engaging with different pieces of content, whether they're going to different menus and they're looking for retail, tickets, tracking teams, being able to provide us more information proactively. Basically giving the fans the key to the car in terms of being able to tell us what they want to tell us so that we can action on that information. That's where I think the current frontier, and honestly even the next frontier as we get more granular on that information, is going to be for us to continue to personalize the fan experience and be able to leverage that in a multitude of ways.
We could have a whole, just to add, and I just interject because both those questions sort of coming together for me on a thought, and you obviously have probably a whole session on either one of those. But I think one of the exciting things from a league's perspective is that the leagues do have data points that the teams don't have, and then they do have a volume of data that the teams don't have as well. So proprietary data sets are going to continue to become more important. We think about the usage of AI really spans across the industry and across like these data pipelines and experiences we're discussing. But in this particular forum, the leagues do have large proprietary data sets, which when we talk, like Zach mentioned, training and predicting can be done on a level that you just can't do it for an individual team. So when we talk about collaboration, we can you could have the best biggest team around say, hey, we've got our own models, and that's great, that's fantastic. But when you think about these additional data points and the ability for a league to train on these big proprietary data assets, that is a really that's a big strength of our industry, frankly, that we have that level of engagement data, and the leagues can aggregate that in a way that an individual team can.
Thank you, Vince. Thank you, Zach. I'm going to shift to a question of mine, but audience members, keep the questions coming in. I see there's one more that we will get to, but please keep throwing the questions in there, and we'll do our best to get to all of them. I want to talk a little bit about brand activation, sponsorship, and how data can be shared across teams and leagues to effectively deliver an experience that a brand wants or prove ROI that a brand wants to see. Where are we currently in that space? How much room to grow do we have? Zach, if I could start with you, that'd be my preference because you brought it up on our prep call.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we've made a good amount of progress, but I would still argue there's a long way to go in terms of the opportunity. I mentioned earlier in this conversation the notion of just us from the league side, our value proposition is being able to provide more fan records and being able to augment existing fan records that teams already have. That's looking at it from a very personalized experience, fan communication, micro targeting perspective. There's obviously, you take a step back and just think about who is my audience? It's the question we've asked for years and years and years, and it's still oftentimes very difficult to answer, to sort of conceptualize and explain to somebody in 5 bullet points. That's really what partners want from us. They want us to talk about our audience, the opportunities, different fan segments. And what we want to do as part of this, our league-wide data initiative here at the league, and I think you're going to see this in a lot of different industries and across sports leagues, is not only provide the information, but provide products, insights, and reporting for teams to be able to better talk about their audience more broadly domestically in areas that they may not have had information already, but also internationally over time. I think we're just scratching the surface in terms of insights that we can tell partners about our fans, not only at the macro level of different segments, how it's evolving and changing over time, but where we also see those connection points between what we have in terms of a sports property, as Vince mentioned, and how valuable that is to a lot of different brands out there, and then being able to storytell in parallel to what we're doing here.
Open this up to Curran as well, but I'll put a follow on to that question. Are you already seeing more satisfied brand partners? And if there are examples, without giving away confidential information or sharing maybe the specific of the brand, are there examples that you can speak to?
Yeah, would be happy to. I would reiterate, I think we're still early in the process here in terms of what we can leverage, but we've actually seen some successful use cases in terms of helping teams storytell about their global audience and being able to bring those touch points that we've talked about in terms of what we capture here on the NBA league side and being able to share those insights with teams. If you think about it, our marketing efforts are obviously a little bit more global in nature in terms of what we're trying to accomplish, in terms of events we're putting on in different regions of the world and people we're trying to engage and bring into the broader funnel of the NBA. We've been able to share those insights down to the team level in a lot of in a few different partner conversations, and we've actually seen a few specific international deals get across the finish line, and we've been told that much of it is due to the data and insights we've been able to provide in those situations.
I would also say from a partnerships perspective, I mean, I agree that I think that there's a lot of opportunity in front. I don't think we're as far down the road as we will be. I think we're going to make a lot more progress. I think that's partially a function of the fact that ticketing tends to get more attention, and then there's a focus. And then because that's a focus, it's a shorter sales cycle, it's bigger data, there's more understanding. The thought initially was, okay, we'll just take that kind of practice and move it to our partnerships business, and it doesn't really work that way. It's different data, it's different study. And so I think as people, and by people I mean clubs and leagues, started to kind of realize that the nature of the understanding changed, and being able to provide not just ROI related data and feedback to partners, either prospective or current, but also broadly able to kind of cater messaging, right? That's part of the personalized fan experience, and what we moved from let's just email everyone in the entire database every single time to let's be a little more targeted and smart about maybe the total numbers are lower, but we actually have people who are more engaged or more interested in what you're offering. Well, how do we know that? That's where that kind of analysis comes in, and a better understanding of their behavior, whether it's the purchase information that Zach was alluding to before, or a non-purchase digital engagement, or what they're looking for specifically, I think has been helpful to that. And so that's been a shift. And then the other thing I would mention is the biggest driver for this, at least in my experience, is the partners are asking now. We've had over the last several years, there's been a pretty significant shift. I think, before the plague, but especially coming out of the plague, like what can we better show the value for? And the partners are saying, hey, we need to actually have some quantitative measurements on this. And from our perspective, with a quarter of our league in Canada, seeing the difference between Canadian or companies and American companies, there is a difference, which means, okay, we're not only personalizing the experience for our fans, we also are for our partners, because they're not all looking for the same sort of information. Part of that is because what's legal in each country, but part of it also is just the nature of the difference of businesses. And so as companies start to ask more and drive more, that makes it easier for us on the back of house analytics data, not necessarily front revenue generating side, to say, hey, this is important. Look, they think so too. How do we get more involved? And that's a driver that's going to push us, I think, into the future.
Let's stick with brands and partners and sponsors. We've got a good question from the audience from Alan Hamilton. Alan says, what are your sponsors' key priorities with digital campaigns? Brand awareness, engagement, data conversion, reach, innovation.
Yes. I think it's an answer. I mean, it depends on the partners. I think we're getting smarter as a league about, and an industry, if I could speak for that, in terms of asking the right questions of our partners and what they're looking for. It does change. There's two parts to it. The first is, okay, what do you want to accomplish by this? And then the second part is how. And those are different things, right? We've had partners in the past, or I've seen partnerships where, yeah, we're trying to grow a fan club membership or a loyalty program, and we're showing digital either advertising or engagement, or a spot in terms of you're sponsoring an activity or whatever, but that doesn't necessarily drive to that target. So the creative doesn't match up with the goal. Well, if you don't tell anyone that you have a loyalty program, but you're saying, hey, come join our loyalty program, that's the ROI, that hurts the program. And then what's the actual success? So I think understanding the specifics of what they're looking for, and it's a very difficult question to answer, because it seems kind of corny, so I apologize, but it really does depend on the partner. We have some who, everybody knows them, right? Like it's not, you're not learning about certain brands tomorrow, right? So I think everybody heard of Pepsi before we got here. That's not necessarily what they're trying to achieve. And some it's smaller. It is about growth. It's about awareness, but some it's also like database growth. Also, They want to capture more people who engage and fans of hockey. That helps them customize their messaging because they're trying to do the same thing. So it really depends on the organization of the partner. And I do think we're getting smarter. If you'd asked that question a few years ago, call it 5, I don't know that the answer would always be so crisp because I don't think we've always been asking those questions, and I don't think the partners always knew. They just wanted the association, and I think everybody's getting smarter, and as a result, things are moving forward.
Thank you, Curran. Thanks for the question, Alan. Another audience question from Brandon Schaefer. Brandon says, in a world with multiple email marketing platforms out there between standalone and ticketing provider in-house ones, how do teams and venues best collect fan information, and do they use one central email marketing platform that works for them, i.e. Factorial, TM Engage, Pacaloqua, etc.?
I think from an MBA perspective, if I'm understanding the question properly, Brandon, there's no one in standard across NBA teams. I think you see certain email service providers, and just even taking a further step back, data warehouse providers and CRM and marketing cloud solutions. I think you're going to hear a lot of the big company names that are generally being leveraged across teams. 5-6 years ago, if we were having this conversation, I think there were more varied players in the space, but I think we've sort of reached predominant consensus in a lot of these areas in terms of what teams are generally using to collect information. Because if you think about it, a lot of these teams, they're not just a team anymore. They're thinking about their venue. They're thinking about other opportunities to collect fan information. They're thinking more globally. So having the industry standard, or frankly, the best in class, is more important today than it was even a few years ago. And that will continue to be the trend over time.
I think it's also a function of, I agree with everything Zach just said, and I would just add that I think it's also a function of the other technology in place. A move from having, if your ESP is, if your email platform is also your fan database, then that's a different requirement for what you need than if you have a separate fan warehouse or customer warehouse, and email is just executing on that. I think that there's a couple of different pieces. I agree that we're kind of becoming more uniform, especially as organizations get smarter about their tech stacks and about making sure they've got the right products while also not trying to Frankenstein something together that's going to be impossible to manage, which, I've done, and it's not fun. So trying to be better about all of those things, I think, has made us smarter. The trick is also that when you think about, like, at a league level, when you're looking at what the clubs are doing, no one's on the same time frame. Everyone has a different length agreement that started at different times, that you can't just say, okay, next week we're all going to start on a new platform because somebody's got 4 years left on their contract. So it takes a little longer to get to where we want to get to on that. But I think that clubs are getting smarter about the different pieces involved, and that the ESP is a critical piece of it, but it's not the only piece of it. And that's I think that's been helpful.
I've got a couple more questions, but we've got questions coming in from the audience. Keep them coming in. We'll try to get to all of them. I want to ask you guys what you wish you knew when you started that you know now. I don't think we're that far along in this process, and there's a lot more to grow. I've heard that a number of times during this session, which is a good thing. But what do you wish you knew when you started that you know now, Vince? Let's kick it to you first.
I think look, whenever you're talking about these relationships and you're talking about leagues and partners and individual sports teams or properties, I think that it is complex. And anytime you're managing partnerships and multiple stakeholder relationships, what I think has been exciting is when we do have when we have a league and its properties step up and say, we're already messaging and nurturing these fans through our own channels. This is happening today, but the left hand doesn't always see what the right hand's doing. I think Curran and Zach would be honest that, like, at times, like, these are relationships where, sometimes things are really good, but there's also sticky points on it. So if we can, what I'd say has been exciting is when we're able to create that better collaboration, it's amazing how much better these partnerships go. teams and leagues working more closely together, we start to see the fans being, even on that email question, like if we can get these fan opportunities into whether it's an email channel or another channel and into those in front of those fans instead of living in somebody's SQL data warehouse or some environment where they don't see the light of day, that's really where the magic happens. So I think that's what I would say. Like I think coming in, I think with some of the wins we're seeing now, I would say that I wish we had some of those strong stories like coming right out of the gate, because it would have been probably easier to paint that picture of just like how much more cohesive this can be for teams and leagues and the fans themselves.
Thank you, Vince. Curran.
I wish I'd known that my mother was correct when she said I should have gone to law school. I think that's probably
I mean, hey, look, as someone who did go to law school, I will take that with a sense of pride.
Yeah, I think I missed an opportunity. I think I think about understanding, just keeping in mind how many different stakeholders were in place is something that I think I didn't fully appreciate. I think I understood from a club perspective, from a vendor, a partner perspective, from a league perspective, but I don't think I was thinking about the different stakeholders within each of those organizations, and that you need to get buy-in from a lot of people. You don't necessarily need a unanimous vote every time, but you got to be pretty close. And so making sure that you haven't just thought through, we think this is important and this is how we're going to do it, and we're going to execute on this data and we're going to provide a better experience, but that there's got to be each group of people, whether it's sales or marketing or development operations or all the other technical components to this, data strategy, or all have to be satisfied with the plan and think it works. And you have to think very globally and cohesively to the point where you need a pretty robust kind of plan of attack on how you want to do this sort of a large scale, data sharing kind of initiative in advance of even starting it, because as you go, and you're gonna run into hiccups and all the time, but as you go through it, having to rebuild whole programs or concepts of stuff repeatedly, it takes a long time, and I think that I wish I probably could have been a little better prepared for that on my end.
Thanks, Curran. Appreciate your honesty. Zach?
In an effort to not just agree with everything Vince and Curran said, I'll take a slightly different approach. I think from an order of operations standpoint, we've done a good job in terms of planning and moving forward in collaboration with the teams. What I wish I knew at the beginning of the process was, we've been very focused, and we've talked about this a lot already on this discussion, the notion of creating comprehensive fan profiles, and being able to use that for a litany of sales and marketing and partnership use cases. We've had a lot of teams communicate with us throughout the process, hey, it would be great to know when Zach Shapiro engages with the NBA app and does this, so that we can then communicate with him in a corresponding fashion, so that we can sort of build that personalized and direct experience with them as quickly as possible. That's obviously a lot more granular detail than just that comprehensive profile that we've been talking about. It's something that obviously Vince's Stellar Algo technology can handle and do a really good job. He talked about a lot of the plays already that you can do with unified data, but also just action-based data that we could be able to deliver to teams more quickly so that they can leverage that information in their own marketing use cases. Because the reality is, not only have data teams grown on the team side over time, so have marketing teams. And they've gotten incredibly sophisticated in what they do in terms of creating broad paid media strategies to that direct personalized experience on a fan-to-fan communication. So we want to make sure we are providing that obviously macro perspective, but those micro details so that they can quickly action and deliver personalized experiences to fans.
We're going to get to one more audience question. We're going to get to my last question. My last question is going to be to ask these guys if they will leave us with our SBJ Live actionable insights. I've asked them to think of 1 to 2 actionable insights that they will leave the audience here with. Maybe those actionable insights will tie a little bit to what they wish they knew before they started, but we will see. Before I do that, though, I'm going to drop in the chat a link to SBJ's conference drive, which is in September, which will go into even more detail about how we can use data to inform decision-making as it relates to working with brands and delivering fan experiences. I hope to see all of you there. This question is from Joe Cacazo. Joe, I apologize if I mispronounced your name. How is data aggregation and the associated insight creating new experiences for fans as opposed to optimizing sales and marketing interactions for the club or league? Joe, I think we touched on that a little bit earlier, but guys, you want to give a few more examples? We did go pretty deeply into the brand side, but let's if you have examples of specific fan experiences that you're proud to share, go for it. And I'll let either of you jump in, or I'll call on.
I'll jump in. As I mentioned before, we obviously have a partnership, a lot of great partnerships. We don't sell a lot of customer-facing products, so I think everything in the world is marketing. So I'd say everybody's in marketing, but really trying to find engagements that reach out to people, the right people, and that are engaged in the right way. And whether it's who your favorite club is, making sure the content is dedicated to that. Whether it's different levels of engagement and avidity. Earlier we talked about how purchase data is the most important data. That is of course true. Not everyone buys things. So how do we engage with people who are engaging digitally in different ways? We have, a more casual, new to hockey digital engagements online that are like little personality quizzes, and you find out which mascot's going to be your best friend. That's for a more casual, new to hockey fan. Well, then we have some more kind of what we'd call like a more avid or engaged fan who knows a little bit more about the game. And we have you make the call. We'll replay a play on the ice, and can you make the call that the linesman made about offsides or not? And we find that different people engage in different ways with different frequency, but really trying to create something that's fun that keeps people engaged when it's not a game. And that's not just the off season, but during the middle of the day. What can people do that are thinking? We want to make sure hockey is front of mind, especially for not just for people who live in our markets who can go to games, but also people who are a little further away and maybe they can't. And how do we make sure we're bringing the right kind of hockey engagement to those people and making it a fun experience? Maybe that's those things I mentioned. Maybe it's we want people to play along with our bingo game that happens during like the Stanley Cup Finals. We'll have games where people can play bingo about events that happen in the game. How do we get people engaged when they're watching on TV and not just about being in the arena, and really trying to create those experiences? And we've done that really based off of how people engage, the type of fans we're reaching out to, and trying to make that an enjoyable experience that doesn't seem like it's a forced kind of uncomfortable thing. It's really more about the enjoyment of the moment and just kind of thinking about it, not making it a part of a bigger sales effort. I think it's been really positive for us. We've seen great response.
Thanks. Joe, go ahead, Zach.
Yeah, I would just say from the NBA side, in addition to things that Curran just mentioned, we're obviously very focused on content and making sure that we're serving the right types of content to our different segments of fans, not only through the NBA app, but across social channels, what have you. So I think having this data aggregation and unified profiles and insights, I mentioned some of the models that we have in place for more sales efforts, but obviously when you think about the segments you're able to build with all of these data points in a singular spot to assess, create insights, and build models off of, that empowers you and enables you to serve up different types of content to different types of fans. We obviously see throughout the playoffs here, for us, the rise of somebody like Anthony Edwards and making sure globally everybody's going to be engaging with somebody like him. But where are the different pockets of fans engaging with different types of teams and players that maybe we didn't know about, so that we can drive further engagement with those fans, make sure they are as engaged with us as possible in our most important part of the season.
Thank you, Zach. Thanks for the question again, Joe. All right, gentlemen, your actionable insights, your SBJ Live actionable insights for today's episode. Let me start with Vince. Go for it, Vince. What do people in the audience need to know if they're interested in investing in a technology that will help them improve decision-making through data?
Yeah, I think honestly, because I'm a sports tech CEO, I'm going to go all OKRs on everybody. And my actionable insight would be, think hard about what are the outcomes, what are those top outcomes that you're trying to drive here are. Like when you think about your fans and your fan data, what are the top business outcomes you're trying to drive? And then from there, you can think about who are the how do I use my partners better to better drive those outcomes? And are there fan opportunities that we could have at our fingertips easier? Are there data points or information on our fans or channels we could be leveraging better if we were partnering closer. And that's if you're a league or if you're an individual team or partner. I think we need to be thinking that way. So yeah, write down your outcomes. It's amazing how many people have a hard time like writing down those top outcomes, especially when you think about like these partnerships. But then start a conversation. And I think if there's interest and there's demand, that's where we get really excited, because we are sort of the technology and the process know-how that makes it possible to bring those fan opportunities to light.
Thank you, Vince. Curran.
I would say that it's about putting yourself in other people's shoes and trying to think about the project and the product that you're putting together. If you're leading an initiative, any kind of initiative around launching, a better understanding of customer data, the sharing aspect of it, collection, execution, activation, whatever, you're passionate about it and you care. It is important to remember that you will need help from a lot of people who don't care as much. And so how do you put, I think that putting yourself in the shoes of everyone impacted, not just the fans, although that should be first. In our case, not just the clubs, although to me that is second, but also, okay, we're going to need technical support. We're going to need legal support. We're going to have marketing support. The clubs are going to have to go, by the way, not every fan is the same. We're going to have to think about different fans engaging with the same thing. How's it going to hit? And I think if you're able to put all that together and before you think about those aspects of it, before you start to create your roadmap and what your project is, you'll have a greater level of success. And it will remind you that you cannot let the perfect be the enemy of the good. You've got to have a good product, but you don't have to wait for everything to be perfect, because you will be waiting until the end of time. And so I think that if you're able to work with those different groups and the stakeholders and thinking about, okay, if I was in this group, what would I think, right? The first thing I think when I go talk to one of our clubs is, how would I feel if I was the club and the league was coming to talk to me? And I try to frame things in that context. You will have, I think, a greater level of success and more buy-in. It's more work up front. It's less work later. It's less trouble later, and it's less failure later. And I think that's what, that's what matters the most.
Thank you, Curran. Zach, your SBJ actionable insight for this episode.
If you don't know where to start, step one, talk to Vince. He knows what he's doing. He's been around the block. He's been on the team side. He leads a great organization now. He has a lot of great perspective. Step two, going to double down on what Curran said there. Consider your stakeholders. Listen to your partners. Listen to your stakeholders. For us on the league side, obviously our top stakeholder are the teams. They have the best understanding of their fans and what they can ultimately get out of this information in terms of their sales and marketing experiences. That's not even just at the start of the project. That's an iterative line of communication that needs to happen, because we've even seen in the infancy of the project that we have here on the NBA side, we've gotten a lot of recommendations from teams that have helped inform the way we've revised our development roadmap in terms of the data and the insights and products that we're ultimately able to build on top of that in partnership with Vince and his team. And then really, really quickly, it might be a little hokey, but consider the fan or consumer, depending on your company, first. And what I really mean by that is, for me, before we went into this initiative, I made sure I downloaded the NBA app. I signed up for NBA ID. I made different purchases, which I was doing as a fan anyways, but actually hit on those touch points that you are expecting to collect data on your fans from, and then see how it ties together on the back end. Because I think having that true understanding of what a fan journey looks like in terms of all these different touch points is going to, frankly, humanize the data a little bit more, and it will make it easier for you in partnership to the people that you collaborate with, whether it's teams, partners, etc. It's going to help you bring those use cases to life, really bring those objectives and key metrics that Vince alluded to life, and make sure you're sort of driving towards the right outcomes.
Zach, Vince, Curran, thank you so much for taking time to do this. To the audience, thank you so much for being here. Thank you to Stellar Algo for the support. We will see everyone next week, where we have another great episode of SBJ Live. Until then, take care. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Dan.